Because neither the Union nor the Confederacy expected the Civil War to last very long, no formal preparations were made for large numbers of prisoners of war. From 1861 to 1862, under the Dix Hill Cartel, both sides agreed to prisoner war exchange agreements. In 1863, Secretary of War Edwin Stanton stopped the exchange. Prisoners would be placed in camps. In January 1864, Confederate soldiers and slaves built a stockade camp of 16 acres in Andersonville, Georgia, named Camp Sumter. The formation of deadlines was ordered within the prison. Those posts were erected 15 feet inside the stockade walls, and guards were ordered to shoot anyone who crossed the deadlines. Designed to hold 10,000 prisoners, it swiftly became overcrowded. Andersonville was enlarged to 26 acres, and by August 1864, it held 33,000 prisoners of war. The first 500 Union prisoners arrived at the Andersonville train depot on February 25, 1864, at 2 o'clock in the morning. Cold rain fell as the men marched half a mile to the prison site.
As we waited, the great gates of the prison swung on their ponderous oaken hinges, and we were ushered into what seemed to us Hades itself. Strange skeleton men in tattered, faded blue gathered and crowded around us. The air of the prison was putrid, awful, and filth covered the ground. Warren Lee Goss, captured Union soldier.
Andersonville became the largest camp during the Civil War. The Confederacy was using all of their resources to fight the war and feed their own soldiers. Enemy prisoners were not an urgent concern. Men used their blankets and overcoats to form little tents called shebangs. Conditions at Andersonville became more difficult every day. As the number of prisoners continued to grow daily, the sparse amount of supplies which they had quickly diminished.
Took a walk around camp. Deplorable sight. Some without clothing. Some in last agonies of death, others writhing under the pains of disease or wounds. Some as black as mulattoes, with smoke and dirt. From the journal of Eugene Forbes, Sergeant of the 4th New Jersey Infantry.
With roughly 400 new prisoners arriving daily, space became the main issue as it became more difficult to stretch out or lay down while confined within the prison. As if space was not the worst condition within the confinement, fresh water became nearly impossible to find. The cookhouse tossed their trash into the water, and the water buildup from the dam was also used in place of the bathroom. The water became undrinkable, and a putrid smell began to settle within the prison walls.
In refutation of the charge that prisoners were starved, let it be noted that the Confederate Congress in May 1861 passed a bill providing that the rations furnished to prisoners of war should be the same in quantity and quality as those issued to the enlisted men in the Army of the Confederacy, and the prisoners at Andersonville received the same rations that were furnished the Confederate Guard. That this was sometimes scant, every old rebel in the field can testify. But this was due to our poverty. Dr. Isaiah H. White, Confederate Chief Surgeon of Military Prisoners.
As the number of prisoners continued to rise, diseases began to spread among the captives. Scurvy, dropsy, diarrhea, and smallpox became a rising medical problem in Andersonville. A hospital was built to treat the sick and dying. By April 25th, 3 months after opening, 2,697 patients had been treated, and 718 had died. However, few bandages were available for men, so treatment was sparse. Some were treated with dirty cloths. Gangrene began to rise due to the infection at the prison. The prisoners of Andersonville gave off a terrible body odor and were covered in dirt throughout their stay at the prison. Soap became of great demand for the prisoners, but became sparse in supply. Some prisoners threw themselves across the deadline so that the guards would shoot and kill them. As more prisoners entered Andersonville, theft became a growing problem. The Raiders, a group formed within the confinement, were known to viciously pounce on anyone who possessed something that they wanted. Captain Wars and a police force called the Regulators finally caught the Raiders. 6 of the Raiders were found guilty of murder and were sentenced to hang. In June 1864, there were 22,291 prisoners and 1,203 deaths in Andersonville. During the month of July, the prisoner count reached 29,030, with 1,742 deaths. The worst month, however, was August of 1864. 32,899 prisoners entered Andersonville, while 2,993 deaths occurred. The total number of prisoners at Andersonville during its existence was 52,300. 13,200 died during that time. During the month of August, a Georgia storm formed a freshwater spring just inside the west deadline of Andersonville Prison. Some prisoners believed that a bolt of lightning had hit the spot, but nevertheless the prisoners now had a clean water stream inside the prison. The little fountain was named the Providence Spring, as the men were certain that it was a gift of God's divine providence. As word spread of the horrible conditions of Andersonville Prison, pressure was placed upon the officials to punish the commanding officer of the prison, Captain Henry Wurz.
The enormity of the crime committed by the rebels cannot but fill with horror the civilized world. There appears to have been a deliberate system of savage and barbarous treatment. Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton.
In May 1865, federal Army officials arrived in Andersonville to arrest Captain Wurz and take him back to Washington, D.C. There, a military court tried, convicted, and sentenced Wurz to hang. They said he had conspired with Confederate officials to impair and injure the health and destroy the lives of large numbers of federal prisoners at Andersonville. As the death warrant was read by Major Russell, Wurz replied,
"I know what orders are, Major, and I am being hanged for obeying them."
In November 1865, Andersonville was proclaimed a national cemetery. In 1970, Congress authorized the Andersonville National Historical Site to serve as a memorial not only to the men who had died while imprisoned during the Civil War, but to all Americans who had ever been held as prisoners of war.
In the prison cell I sit, thinking, mother dear, of you, and our bright and happy home so far away.